On PrimeTime Politics tonight, the federal government unveils new gun control legislation that includes a buyback of assault-style weapons banned last spring. But the program will be voluntary. How will that make communities safer? I'll speak with the Minister of Justice about the new measures. This week marks the beginning of a major ramp-up in vaccine supply for Canada, and that underscores Canada's dependence on foreign vaccines. Tonight, we'll hear from one Canadian company on the push for a made-in-Canada solution. And our panel of parliamentary journalists will be here to discuss the key stories of the day. We'll begin tonight with new gun control legislation, Bill C-21, unveiled today by the federal government. After announcing a ban last May on some 1,500 models and variants of assault-style weapons, today's legislation proposes to buy the banned weapons back at a fair market price. But owners could also keep the weapons if they meet certain strict conditions. Those include not using the guns, selling them, transporting them, transferring or bequeathing them. The government says the voluntary buyback program would cost an estimated $300 to $400 million. Other measures include red flag laws to allow for the immediate removal of someone's firearms if they present a threat, and allowing municipalities to ban handguns.
We also need to ensure that anyone who chooses to keep those weapons needs to store them securely, needs to inform us fully about all the details on those weapons and demonstrate secure storage for it while not using it. These are the things that we have determined is the best path forward to keep Canadians safe, to get as many of these weapons out of circulation in this country as possible, and to ensure people are safe moving forward.
I think Mr. Trudeau misleads people when he tries to suggest that buying things back from hunters and other Canadians who are law-abiding is somehow going to solve the problem of shooting and criminal gang activity in the big cities. It's ignoring the real problem, and it's dividing Canadians.
My main concern is that this might prove to be an electoral statement by the government, which doesn't want to displease anybody, and will make this law or the part of it about the buyback policy not mandatory, which makes the position, the law, under many regards, useless.
Canada's Minister of Justice, David Lametti, was at the news conference today on the new gun control measures. He joins me now. Minister, good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Pleased to be here.
Look, why has your government decided that a voluntary buyback program for assault-style weapons is the way to go in this country instead of implementing a mandatory buyback program, which a lot of people have been calling for?
Well, look, first of all, this really does complete what we did in May in banning military-style assault weapons. What we're doing here, it's not a voluntary buyback in the sense that other people think about voluntary buybacks. What we learned from the Australian and the New Zealand experience was that they really needed to get more information about the guns out there. And this is the message that we got. So while they did have a so-called mandatory buyback, they ended up getting about 50,000 weapons returned, and they think there's probably another 100,000 out there in the New Zealand case. What we're doing is we are creating an incentive scheme and mandating that people have to now register these weapons. They will be subject to strict regulation in terms of storage. They'll have to report to us on that storage, pay a fee. And then when we have that information, what we have in addition is a buyback incentive, because they won't be able to use the weapon for anything. They're prohibited from using the weapon for any purpose. They can't shoot it. They can't transport it. They can't sell it. They can't give it away.
Right.
So they can look at it, and that's it. And so we think that given this whole package together, there's a great deal of incentive for people to turn their gun in for a fair market price.
What's the cash incentive? What's the fair market price?
Well, it has yet to be established. I know Minister Blair mentioned a figure today, but we have to, look at the market more carefully.
I think he said $1,300, but that was still being discussed.
That's right.
Okay, and so how will that be determined? I mean, I've heard gun owners say these things are anywhere from that kind of price to up to $2,000, $2,500. So how will you decide what's a fair market price?
Well, that's something that Minister Blair's team and the whole team at Public Security is going to have to look at over time, and they'll do that. Those are next steps. But for the time being, the important part of it is getting the regulatory picture in place, in the sense that we need to get these guns weren't registered before. So as with other countries, there wasn't an idea of what was out there. We're going to get a better picture of what's out there. We're going to force people to register. And we're going to have these weapons safely stored. They won't be able to be used for anything else. So I think that's a good start, and then we'll work on the buyback program as we
but how, like, the whole idea of this crackdown is to make communities safer. So I guess how is the threat to others minimized if a person is still allowed to keep the banned assault style weapon? If that person wants to commit a mass shooting, what's in this bill to stop them from using that weapon?
Well, we also have the extreme risk provisions, so the so-called red flag and yellow flag laws. What we've done, where there is a fear that a person, let's say the guns are in the hands of the wrong person for whatever reason, anybody with knowledge of that can go to a justice of the peace, get a court order, and those guns can be seized immediately. And that's something that community knowledge is there. It's not just the potential victims, but anybody else who may know about the existence of these weapons can go to a peace officer. And these red flag laws, which a number of experts think are critically important to this, and where the Biden administration is actually going. All of these are, I think, very strong measures. There are also yellow flag laws, which are slightly less serious, but would involve a lapse and a suspension of the registration of the weapon. So all of these help others around the gun, if you will, to be able to flag when it's not being used properly.
I guess it occurs to me that allowing gun owners to hang on to these weapons does raise the potential, I suppose, of a future government reversing the ban. Maybe gun owners will think that might happen. They'll just hang on to them in the hopes that the future government will reverse the ban. What's the potential of that?
Well, we're enshrining this in law, and so it would require a legal change. Mm-hmm. Let me underscore that the majority of Canadians, vast majority of Canadians, are law-abiding citizens. The vast majority of gun owners in Canada are law-abiding citizens who use their guns for hunting and for sport. And we're not touching those guns. And we're trusting that other people who own what are these now prohibited weapons will want to remain on the right side of the law and will do what the law is asking them to do, and they'll continue to be legal. Okay,
a couple of quick questions to finish up here on this, and I want to quickly ask you about assisted dying as well. But there are also provisions in this bill that would allow municipalities to ban handguns, backed up with penalties. And why is your government going that route instead of introducing a national handgun ban and avoiding a possible patchwork of rules across the country?
Well, I think this represents the reality of Canada, and that the ways in which guns are used are different in certain parts of the country than in others. So it allows municipalities where there is a belief, a very strong belief, and I share it as an urban Montrealer, that handguns have no place in our cities. So it allows those cities to move forward. Obviously, we have to respect the fact that cities are creatures of the provinces, and their bylaw power comes from the provinces, and so they'll have to work with the provinces, and so will we, in order to affect these kinds of bans.
Okay, let me ask you about your bill on assisted dying. The Senate has proposed amendments that would allow people who fear being diagnosed with dementia or other comparable disorders to make advance requests for an assisted death. Another amendment would put an 18-month time limit on the proposed ban on assisted death for people with a mental illness as their only underlying ailment. Are you prepared to consider those amendments as the clock ticks down here to a February 26th deadline?
Look, we've said from the outset this is a difficult issue. The issues that the Senate has identified, that you've identified, are very deeply held and difficult issues. We thought we had the balance right, but of course we've said from the beginning we would respect the parliamentary process. I thank the work the Senate has done, and we obviously owe them a close look at all of these provisions in their totality to see where it takes the legislation. We'll certainly consider all of them, and hopefully we'll be in a position to get back to you in coming days.
All right, Justice Minister David Lametti, always good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Peter.
The federal government is banking on the hope that Canada is about to see a big boost in vaccinations. After a month of sluggish vaccine supply, starting this week and into early April, Canada is expecting a combined total of well over 400,000 doses a week of Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. That will include 1.3 million doses of the Moderna vaccine, all in the month of March, in order for the company to meet its obligation of 2 million doses by then. Today, the Prime Minister once again defended the federal plan against opposition criticism.
We live in a country of nearly 38 million people. To vaccinate everyone is going to take a colossal effort. So will the Prime Minister start showing leadership by committing today that the federal government will fund federal vaccination sites across this country to vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the NDP, apparently, we understand Canada's Constitution and respect provincial responsibility on healthcare delivery. We have worked hand in hand with them from the very beginning to deliver vaccines for Canadians. We are moving forward on supporting the provinces as they vaccinate and as we brace for the big lift, the moment in which tens of millions of vaccines will be arriving in Canada, and we're going to need to work very quickly to vaccinate everyone. We will be there for Canadians as we have from the beginning.
Well, the ups and downs of vaccine supply has underscored Canada's dependence on foreign vaccine suppliers and our lack of domestic capacity. The House of Commons Industry Committee is holding hearings on that. Canadian companies are working to produce a Canadian vaccine. One of those companies is Providence Therapeutics of Calgary. CEO Brad Sorenson appeared before the committee today, and he's with me now from Calgary. Mr. Sorenson, good to see you. Thanks for making time for me tonight. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on.
You said today that as early as March of last year, your company had developed the vaccine, and here we are today, the vaccine's in human trials. And I guess my question to start us off here is, are you satisfied that you received all the support you needed from the federal government or its agencies to get your vaccine produced and tested as quickly as possible?
We received excellent support from the agencies of the federal government. I don't believe those agencies were given the wherewithal to do as much as they had hoped to do.
How do you mean?
So I don't believe that there was a lot of strategic vision within at the decision-making level in the federal government to really enable the agencies, i.e. The NRC, to really push forward with an aggressive speed the programs that they were interested in moving forward with.
Yeah, so I guess if I'm hearing it correctly, here you are in the midst of this pandemic, trying to create a Canadian solution. You're probably trying to run at the speed of sound. You're trying to move here, but you're up against a machine that is not thinking the same way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, when I was dealing with our counterparts at the NRC, I mean, you could sense the frustration that they had as well, in that they realized we wanted to move forward faster. We wanted to take things, I mean, simple things. We got support for our phase 1 trial. Well, there's a lot of work while you're in phase 1 trial that you need to do to be ready for phase 2 and phase 3 and to ramp up production. And, basically their mandate is, well, we have to get through phase 1, evaluate that in a very sequential nature. And that's not going to succeed in responding to a pandemic. The U.S. had Operation Warp Speed where so many things were running in parallel. And that's what we're trying to engage the federal government to sort of stop the sequential thinking as it relates to Canadian vaccine development and be a lot more, have their own sort of warp speed approach.
So I guess the bottom line is, could you have had an approved vaccine by now, being given to Canadians, manufactured in Canada, if you had received, I suppose, the right kind of support from the federal government, or has this process moved as quickly as it could have?
No, we definitely could have moved faster. Moderna got $1 billion, and they got, green lighted, by the FDA on numerous exceptions. Would we be in the exact same position as Moderna? Likely no, but we weren't looking to do that. We would have been. Right now, we're talking about our phase 1 trial and wrapping up production to begin this summer. We would be in our phase 3 trial. There's no doubt in my mind. We could have run our phase 1 trial starting last summer if we would have had the support, and as we originally proposed. But I'm not really here to sort of litigate the past. I'm here to sort of focus on what can we do in the future and learn from our mistakes.
Let's do that. We know the Manitoba government's ordered 2 million doses of your vaccine once it's approved. What interest have you received now from other provinces or the federal government to push this product along and to get it ready for Canadians as quickly as possible?
Yeah, so certainly. Manitoba taking the initiative and reaching out to us to purchase vaccines certainly lit a fire under other premiers. And so we're definitely talking to other premiers right now. And, I'm happy to say that we had our first discussion with Minister Champagne and, over the weekend, which was I would characterize as a very productive discussion. And so, I have to tip my hat and thank, Minister Pallister, or Premier Pallister, for taking that initiative, because I don't think that would have happened had somebody not stepped forward in a leadership role in Canada and made it happen.
Okay, this committee, let's talk a little bit about the future. This committee is looking at ways, the industry committee, to build a Canadian vaccine capacity. That's what you're all about here. What's required to put Canada back in the vaccine game, and how quickly can it happen? Because I don't think a lot of people believe this will be the last pandemic.
Certainly. And so there's a lot of discussion about capacity and building up manufacturing capacity in Canada. And on the committee meeting today, there was, an individual that was representing a group out of Saskatchewan. I believe that it's important for Canada to support, this research and this work across a number of platforms. Obviously, as CEO of Providence Therapeutics, I believe very strongly in messenger RNA, mm-hmm. and that's what we're taking forward. But that doesn't exclude, us doing other things in Canada, and so, and it's different manufacturing. We don't need some of the same facility setup that you would see with these other more traditional ways of producing vaccines. Right. Ours is all synthetic. It's actually very, very simple for us to set up and to increase capacity. I think it surprised some people on the committee today when they heard that, in July, we're going to be producing 500,000 doses a day with our partners, Northern RNA and Emergent Biosolutions mm-hmm. in Canada. And, there was some other folks in the meeting that were kind of at disbelief that this could happen, but that's the reality of messenger RNA. Right. It's very scalable.
And your closing message here, as I hear it, is that yes, Providence is wants to be in that game and considered and helped and so on. But it's important. I think the lesson we may have learned here is that you need to have you dip your oar in a bunch of different bodies of water here to fight this pandemic and make sure that, I think that's what I hear you saying, make sure that we're supporting this kind of research across many different organizations and groups. All right, Mr. Sorenson, thanks for your time. It was good to be able to talk to you today. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Let's bring in our panel of parliamentary journalists now to talk about some of the key stories of the day. Susan Delacourt is a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. And John Ivison is a columnist for the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Post Media. Good to see you all. Susan, let me throw it out to you to start here. New gun control legislation tabled today includes this voluntary buyback on those 1,500 banned assault-style weapons. What do you think of the government's approach here?
Well, it's from early reaction, it doesn't seem that it's attracted the support of the people who wanted something tougher, and it's, as usual, going to enrage the people who don't believe that there should be any gun control at all, and that their government is just going after legal gun owners. So if the success of a political move is measured by its ability to annoy both sides, then I would say this is a winner. But they're doing it because they said they were going to, but I'm not sure exactly what is accomplished here, and the timing is interesting too. It's, you know, the big issue on Canadians' minds was gun control last May when we saw the shootings in Nova Scotia, but in the middle of February when it seems we're consumed with the pandemic. It was interesting timing.
Great. Joël-Denis, what are your thoughts on this? And it seems in talking to the Justice Minister, David Lametti, a little earlier in the program, they're putting a lot of emphasis on the whole incentives idea, even though we don't exactly have cost numbers attached yet. They're really hoping that if they tell people these guns, well, if you want to keep them, they sit in your basement forever, you can't touch them, or you can get some money back by selling them to us. The incentive point seems to be the one that the government's really holding out there.
Yeah, exactly. They're now following exactly the example of New Zealand, which made the program compulsory,
right,
obligatory. You had to bring back your gun, or otherwise you'd be caught with some heavy fines or criminal penalty. So they want to appeal to the good sense of responsibilities of gun owners who will have guns that are illegal, they can no longer be used, bring them back to government, and then have some compensation. The interesting thing is that neither the Prime Minister nor Minister Bill Blair wanted to tell us today during press conferences how much will this cost. They have an estimate of how many of those guns might be out there, between 150,000 and 200,000, but they won't tell us how much.
I thought at one point he got pulled around to saying it might be somewhere between $300 million and $400 million, based on sort of $1,300 a gun as the buyback. But I've had lots of gun owners suggest to me that their guns are worth way more than that, and $1,300 won't cut it. But John, let me jump to you here. And it occurs to me that, and I've raised it with Mr. Lametti, that the notion that there will be, I think, a fair number of gun owners who won't buy the incentive thing. They'll say, look, I'm going to keep this in my basement on the off chance that maybe a conservative government gets in and reverses the ban. Is that, how realistic do you think is that as a way of thinking?
Well, you know, I mean, cost estimates, we were all around for the $1 billion boondoggle on the gun registry, so I don't think they probably count for too much. You know, if you're a gun owner and you're getting offered $1,300 and you think your gun's worth $2,000 or whatever, and there's a prospect that this law might be repealed, then why wouldn't you do that? You know, at the end of the day, I'm not sure why anybody would need an assault rifle, to be honest, but you know, the government, again, seems a little bit ham-fisted in the way that they've done this. You're either going to repeal it and do it compulsorily, which apparently is effective according to the studies, or you're going to do it the way that they've done it and not be effective.
Joël-Denis, let me flip to you on vaccines here. The Minister, Procurement, Minister Anand, said today that they expect Moderna to deliver 1.3 million doses in March to meet their obligations. You know, the ramp-up starts this week with more Pfizer vaccine coming and so on. How important are the next 4 to 6 weeks for the government here in terms of vaccine rollout?
It is critical, and I think it's also critical that the federal government, given that it's going to get more vaccines, get the provinces up to speed as how many we'll get per week, because the provinces have to administer those vaccines, and if they get too many and not enough people to get those vaccines in the arms of Canadians, we have another problem: not enough people to administer those vaccines. So it's critical for the government to make sure that the provinces are aware of what's coming up and prepare in consequence. And I think the Prime Minister and the federal government should reiterate their offer of putting maybe military personnel or armed forces to support the vaccination campaign.
That's what Jagmeet Singh is pushing for. And Susan,
Yep.
we've seen another recent survey. 69% of Canadians blame the feds, not the provinces, for the slow vaccine rollout. I'm sure the federal government would like to, crush that number in the next 6 weeks by having everything go well. What are you watching for, and how important are the next 5 to 6 weeks for the federal government?
Hugely. We are in a really intense race here. The variants, as we see in Newfoundland, went from having no cases to having to shut down an election, basically, over the weekend. The variants are a huge problem in this, and they are racing faster than the vaccines are getting to Canada. So I think, and we're seeing, week after week, people are looking for somebody to blame for this. I don't know that people are directly connecting, I don't have vaccine and I'm just mad at this pandemic. But it's a collision of forces right now. A variant that is making things, threatening a third lockdown, vaccines that were held up just a couple of weeks, and a federal government that is probably a little bit worried about the mood out there of the public.
John, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think the government set a relatively low bar by saying that they would have 6 million doses by the end of March, and then everybody who wants a vaccination by the end of September. I think by their own calculation at the start of the year, when you look at the number of vaccines that they were getting set to approve, that this was a really attainable number, and now it looks less attainable. I mean, for Moderna to hit the 2 million dose mark by the end of March, they've really got to crank it out, and 4 million from Pfizer by the end of March. I think if the government doesn't hit them, then there really will be, there's anger already and frustration already, but it'll be apoplexy because, as Susan just mentioned, this is not a political debate or an academic debate. This is actually people's lives, and I think we are heading to a third wave, and maybe the most acute wave yet, when you've got variants out there that are 60 to 70% more virulent than the ones we've been dealing with. So, the government is really on a what you would say a cricket, a sticky wicket here. It's really got to get this done by March. It's got to get it done for sure by September.
Let me quickly go ahead, John.
Sorry.
Yeah, I got you.
Or they seem their lead in the polls seems almost impregnable, but it won't be if they miss those two deadlines.
Right. Let me stick with you quickly here in the latest developments on the Canada-China relationship. 2 Michaels are still being detained. The ongoing clampdown on freedoms in Hong Kong. The declaration that Canada led without actually identifying China calls to relocate the Olympic Games next year. How's the Prime Minister and his government? How are they handling this now?
Well, I saw the Prime Minister today was asked about whether there's a genocide taking place in Xinjiang. When you look at that closely, and the people who are being detained, many of the women are being sterilized. That is an attempt to eradicate that ethnic group, which would seem to fit the bill. He agreed with the use of the word genocide when it came to the missing Native women's inquiry. I think that's a little bit inconsistent on his part. The government still seems to have blinders on about China. I interviewed Mark Garneau, and he was talking about cooperating with the Chinese. I think it's going to be very hard to cooperate with the Chinese going forward.
Susan, what do you think of the latest developments we've seen in the government's handling of the China file?
I'm waiting to see. It feels like it's escalating all around. That was an impressive list there of things that were going on. It was Erin O'Toole out today asking for the ban on the Olympics. It feels like something is moving. I'm not sure it's toward cooperation, but I think the unknown factor in the mix is Joe Biden. When Kamala Harris and the Prime Minister spoke a couple of weeks ago, they talked about the 2 Michaels. I get the sense that something is moving, but as usual with this one, most of it is happening behind the scenes, and it's all done in this strange cryptic language of diplomacy.
Let me give a final word to you on this in the little bit of time we have left, JD.
Well, it seems to me that the Liberal government is trying to find the right tone again, still after many years in power, towards China. And I suspect that they will take some cues from the new Joe Biden administration, who, as Mr. Biden has said, he wants to have a firm stand on China. So if the U.S. Takes a firmer stand, I think you will hear Canada follow suit soon.
All right. Thank you all for your time tonight, and we'll be chatting again soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
That's all for this edition of Primetime Politics. Thanks for watching. Take care.